Hello and welcome to At One with Animals, Conversations to Inspire. I'm Janine O'Payne, and these conversations are in collaboration with Animal Talk Africa and in support of the Global White Lion Protection Trust. My guest today is Anthea Myburgh, who lives just outside Cape Town in South Africa. Anthea is an animal communicator and she uses several other modalities to help animals and people. Until a couple of years ago, Anthea was working in the tourism industry, and as so many people working in that kind of industry over the last couple of years, she's not had an income. So it has been an opportunity for her to share her abilities and gifts with people, which has been a blessing in disguise. And she shares the kind of work that she does, how she got to where she is now, and what it's been like for her over the last 6 months as she's been moving more and more fully into working full-time as an animal communicator and healer. This conversation is in 2 parts, and part 2 will be uploaded shortly. Hi, Anthea. I really appreciate you taking time out of your very busy schedule to talk with me today.
Hi, Janine. Thank you so much. And I really appreciate the opportunity as well to share a little bit. So thank you as well. And for everything that you do for the animals and sharing the stories of the people that do the work with them. So thank you.
In light of this morning's events, Anthea and I are going to just say a short prayer for the people of the Ukraine and of the world. So we pray for the hearts of everybody to open, to awaken. The work that I'm doing here now is about opening people's hearts and minds to animals, to the truth of animals. And in that same way now, we send out love to all involved and all affected by the misuse of power in the world. We pray for hearts to open and for minds to awaken. Amen.
Wow.
Okay, so Anthea, you and I, we've never physically met, but we've been very close friends since about 2014, when we met online as we were both doing Winter Worsthorne's animal communication course. So I guess the first thing I'd like to ask is what was your childhood like? Was there a spark of that animal communication there? And what led you to Winter's course?
Great question. Thank you. So animals have been integral in my life from whenever I can remember. I was the youngest, but quite a lot younger. My siblings had left home by the time I was sort of getting into school. And my closest memories going back of working with the animals was we had this old house with a long corridor, and I would have to go and fetch something for my mum at the very end of the passageway, and it was dark and scary, and I didn't want to go because like little 4, 5, 6-year-old me was terrified of this thing in the dark, and the solution was to take the cat. So my cat used to accompany me on the dark missions, and I guess that just started forging. I have such memories with, I got a pony. I was very lucky before I knew I wanted one. And we, yeah, through that and all the animals. I remember when I was probably about 11 years old, and we had a Rottweiler who I was actually a little bit scared of. And I sat there in the horse camp with him and had this long heart-to-heart telling him that I didn't mind him, but he made me scared. And I don't remember everything, but I remember him looking at me, and it was almost like he said he understood. And that for me was just totally convinced me. I also remember as a little girl always saying to people that we're building this world on top of a world that already exists. And it used to really upset me. And then I guess I got caught in the systems, and it was always a back thought. Until now, 12 years ago, a rescue horse that we had on the farm where we live got stolen. And through that process, it was possibly my ignition back into horses. I'd not had horses in my life for 10 years at that stage. And it was through standing up for this horse and seeing this collective gathering of support without really asking for it. And then this need to get another security dog, which just also happened to be a young Rottweiler. And this dog had no boundaries. She would go kilometers and would drive me mad because, you know, in that fear state, it was, we need security. The security's gone. And someone recommended to me to contact Winter. And just the working with her, it was incredible. I mean, this process of her giving me these clear guidelines of this dog seeing she had a bigger premises to guard. So she was doing her work, but just not in my perimeters. She just expanded it. So when connecting with her and explaining to all of this, which Winter had helped me with, things just changed dramatically. And I started to realize, like, the communication, just even the hi, I'll be back at 2. And if I got back at 1, she'd come careering along the road with, oh my goodness, you back early. And that really just seated in that it just ignited that fire again. And I just knew I had to. And I started my first training was actually with Anna Breitenbach. And then from there, it went on to Winter and the Academy. And, you know, the rest is history.
When you said about needing security, and that's why you got, well, what did you mean?
There was a feeling of unsafety. We'd had youths that had come and stolen the horses, or one horse, the other one got away. And I guess my answer then was very different to my answer now. Now my answer would be that there wasn't enough love in my heart, and that feeling, that internal feeling being projected and looking outside for this feeling of safety. And I guess, yeah, that was that sense. We're on a farm, so you wanted someone to make a noise, and always look scary. So a little bit of the conventional feelings there in that. But I didn't realize that I was actually just getting my teacher.
Yeah. And, you know, we all have to come from somewhere, you know. There's not many of us who are born onto this path, you know. So so when you said a world on top of a world, can you elaborate on what you meant?
Yeah. So if I go back to the wisdom of a 6-year-old, just seeing these cement buildings and things being built on top of ecosystems. And I didn't know the biologies and the science, but it always troubled me that we would rip out trees and hurt the animals and build these structures and things. I think at that stage I would have quite happily gone feral and gone to go and live in a forest somewhere in a tree. the magic faraway tree was like my favorite childhood story, and many hours fantasizing about the lands on top and living in a living in one of the little hidey holes. And I spent a lot of time in trees, but it was really this feeling of we are destroying things to create our own things, and they're not of nature. We're making things that exist already, and through that destroying it. And I didn't understand it then. I have a better understanding it now in my adult version. And a lot of my thoughts, especially of late through this time that we're living in, this repetition of patterns, and like nature, everything is the sacred geometry and repetition. And we've almost taken that imprint, put a slight little misthread, and the imprints, that the reprinting that we're busy repeating, even though it's got a source in nature, is being copied almost in the synthetic way. That I guess I don't really have the words of how I can feel it. I can't describe it properly, but that feeling of realigning back away from that misprint that we have, that we do it in alignment again with nature, and that's what she's calling us to do. This call of awakening feels very much along those lines of not destroying her to build this world on top, but to build this world with. If you think of Machu Picchu, in the Peru, the people there, the Aztecs, were shown and guided how to do their irrigations and its complicated systems hundreds and thousands of years ago, through the guidance of nature. And so I guess without really having all the scientific facts and figures, it's really this feeling inside me, and feeling quite strongly that we all have a right to life.
Just to say that I'll meet you at the faraway tree, and
fantastic.
Yep, I'm there with you.
Moon face.
And I like that, nature as teacher. And it's like the world that's been built on top of world, it's like we want to break that world down, and it's almost as if we have to, in some ways, for humanity to survive, because we know we can't go on the way that we're going. And I just love talking with people about Indigenous cultures and how they, how we can learn so much from them. And, in the way that you talk about Machu Picchu, because Indigenous cultures are so in tune with the earth and nature. So, yeah, beautiful. When we first started talking, I remember so clearly, I was in awe of the relationship you had with all your animals. You were just so in tune in a way that I wasn't with mine. And I remember you'd said to me once that one of your cats, Shira, had been hit by a car, and you'd communicated with her and she'd requested not to go to the vet. And I was in awe of that, because I felt that was really honoring her request and not putting our human fears onto, like, something's happened, let's go to the vet. And I remember you saying that you were watching her and keeping an eye on her to make sure that she was okay. But I remember that moment so clearly, what that was 7.5 years ago. And I remember it so clearly. And I just wanted to say that, how much I honored that you and your animals were one unit and in a beautiful flow together. It's beautiful.
Thank you. Thank you. I get challenged with that too sometimes also. There are times where I have fallen into that fear side and not quite listening, and then being straightened out again, so to speak. So it's an ongoing, especially when we're worried. It does get challenging, and vets have a very important place as well. There are times when they are needed, and they do, but I do see from my own past experiences and misexperiences in my life before this animal communication journey, where one would end up going and then come back with no answer, just a bag of pills that might or might not work, and there you go. And it's really that feeling of finding that discernment over the fear, and trusting that they know. I see it with, I'm moving more and more to the selections with herbs and oils and things in my work, and I mean working with my own animals, and it's quite incredible sometimes what they do and don't choose, and what we think might be good, and it's really just having to sort of hand it over. So it's not always the popular way in the mainstream, but I think, yeah, the zoopharmacognosy now, which big word, but basically the self-selection of different things for the animals, and I'm still studying that, but the best practice is always self-practice, and it's quite incredible where sometimes I'll have a hunch on something and it's right, and then other times it'll be a hunch, and then when they've rejected it, it's actually feeling into, where did that hunch come from? Was it my head saying that we must have this because Google said this, or whatever it was, or was it really the animal? And invariably it's when the head has said this is good.
Yeah, I love that, because it is trust. It is a lesson. It is like life is this whole lesson of learning what is intuition and what is a mental thought. And it reminded me, sort of talking about what happened with Shira, that you trusted her, but you also trusted yourself to trust her. Hello. Maya's just joining us. So it just reminded me of this experience I had when I lived in England with my dog Zach. He had run outside, and he ran out, and I heard him whack a leg on the ridge of the door, and I just noticed it, and then I don't know, I think, and this is why I think I really respected what you'd done with Shira, is that you'd listen to her, because I was always, something was wrong, vet, and that was me. I was, I had to learn to discern between my fears but my fears were very heightened at the time, and I said to my ex-husband a couple of times about taking him to the vet because he was limping, and my ex-husband, he got sick of me wanting to go to the vet all the time. So he said no. So I doubted myself and I ignored it. And then 3 weeks later, we were out on Dartmoor. The dogs were running around, and Zach kind of stopped and put his leg up, and he wasn't walking anymore. And I actually had to, in this big standard poodle, and I had to carry him to the car. And he had broken his leg. And so I had to learn, it was, so yeah, it's like you say, it's learning where is it coming from? And of course I had the mental fear, but also at the same time, there must have been an intuition that was pushing. So the two together was, so it is, I agree, part of our journey to discern where those thoughts or where the information, however it comes, is actually coming from.
And yeah, absolutely. Thank you for sharing that. It is a fine line between the two, especially when something's a little bit more serious. And they show, and they have a different outlook to disease and unwell and all that to us as well. And it's also looking at that, and it's not saying that there is a cure and you don't go and get it because, oh, I mustn't do that. It's doing what works because we have it. But it's finding that middle line between the balance of it. And really trusting what feels right inside. And that can challenge you sometimes. It really does. And I guess those challenges is also the parts where we grow through. I mean, I've done things in the past where I've regretted not listening to the animal enough. Sometimes is usually the one. And then when I felt into that, the question, the answer that comes back is always part of that learning and part of that experience. And they also hear for their own experiences as much as they interwoven in ours. They have their own sort of role and journey that they are also coming to evolve higher and transcend. I spoke with a cat the other day who had been through illness, and what came through was it was needing to burn off some very past history that had happened, and it needed this time now to work through that. So we don't really understand this big mystery.
I love that you've said that, because I've been doing this work. Well, my first course was in 2004, so I've been doing it and aware of it at the same time, even if I'm not actually working with clients. And a feeling that I've had more and more strongly over the years, but I didn't start out with this, was that they're here for themselves as well. They're here for their own experiences as well. But I definitely started out thinking, Zach was here for me to get me on a spiritual path to grow, because that's what it felt. That's what happened. Zach got me on a spiritual path because of Zach's epilepsy, because something in me, I don't know, I just felt, I don't know what it was. I can't tell you. I just went to the health food shop. My dog's got epilepsy, and it went from there. And, it was like this explosion of, knowledge or finding out about people who had different knowledge and, changed my life. And so for many years, I thought Zach came here to help me grow. And now spending more time, more consciously with animals that I live with, I see it's less and less about me these days.
As you're growing.
Yeah.
So they don't have to work so hard anymore and focus more on their journey.
Yeah.
So I had a sense the other day of looking at all these animals and, the dogs sleeping around, and it's, well, how much is sleeping and how much is really meditating and going into those spaces, and how much they hold in. I'm sure you also see it in your work now, particularly in these times where we all being challenged and we all being pushed, and the anxiety shows more in the animals when we're being pushed, and these world events like what we acknowledged earlier, they feel it, and I go back to, like, there's the school where sometimes that's not always a popular way of thinking, yet we bring in the animals that are trained to bring in the heart attack and be able to know or be able to detect cancer, and they feel those things before it lands in the physical. And through observation, I've seen it in my own animals. My dog knows I'm going to have a bad day before I do, and I'm learning now to look at her to see, I mean, it's not a needy thing, but just a more of an awareness of things, which also help one to sort of prepared to know, okay, today is maybe going to be a little bit more challenging. And I mean, that's what meditation does. It's never having a bad meditation. It's just a observation that, okay, today I'm a little bit more scatty. It's nothing more than that.
No, I love that idea about meditation. When I am in a meditative state, it's about being more sensitive. So, you can, in the evenings, you can meditate and go back over your day and almost see more about what happened than what you did in that very moment. And obviously the point is over time to become more and more aware of what's happening in the moment, to be more sensitive, not in an emotional way, but sensitive in that you can sense the energies and the energies of yourself, but also the energies of the animals that you live with or are around.
Definitely, yeah. They are here to support us and help, and particularly now. I mean, we're going through this time of sort of great potential and great challenges at the same time. I mean, there's not one person that I'm familiar with that is not feeling the pressure in one way or another. And yeah, and yet it's also this time of this incredible opportunity to really work with that discomfort. And use it in the best way possible. Yeah, nothing gets done when we're comfortable.
So since you started to develop your work with animals, you have learned quite a few other therapies. So one of them is constellation work. So can you tell us about that?
Yes, sure. So yeah, I seem to have taken Winter's suggestion of one has to work on themselves as well to be able to really hear the animals. And I probably took that a little bit too seriously and found myself on this parallel journey with the constellation work. It's something that's becoming a little bit more known in the mainstream now. It's a means of being able to look at your family system. If someone's struggling with whether it's a relationship in the family or health issues or just challenges of being themselves, or depression, it can help to shine a light on things that are difficult. And a method developed by a German man called Bert Hellinger, who observed in the Zulus when he did missionary work there, that they always acknowledge the ancestors and those that came before. And that process of seeing and acknowledging, and he developed through that this method of being able to help people move through difficult things just through looking what's going on in this family system. I guess an easy way to describe it would be looking at the morphic field of that, and there's these orders of love that when those things aren't in harmony, it causes challenges. So the morphic field is a term that actually Rupert Sheldrake used in his work, and it's an energy field, and in that everything, us included, is energy, and it would be an energy field of resonance. So in a family system, how I understand it is that is the morphic field of this family system, and you born into this, where there's the past, your generations before you and the generations to come. But it's not this compartmentalized, because it's two that come together to create the child. And then there's a flow and an energy in that field. So when birds are flying or the herd is running, so when these birds are flying, and you see these big flocks of birds, and they're flying and they're swishing and sloshing, that's almost them. They are creating this morphic field that they go in. There's no thinking. There's just an absolute being of following the movements. So that would almost be a good description of the morphic field invisibility. And in that, we have that in our own life and our family systems and what the constellation work does. So it's not like you've got to suddenly do like voodoo stuff and that. It's a matter of it's always there. So when somebody comes to me and they say that they want to look at something in their family, and I'm working with the horses, you'll start seeing the horses feeling the energy that they're giving off, and for the harmony, because that's where the soul wants to move into harmony, and the horses will pick up where the disharmony is and show that. And because it's not this something you can touch, the working with less words and working with the energy of it and the feeling is a very powerful way, in that if you had to take a family system, or the person, Bob comes to me and he's got, let's say, this morphic field, and we look at that as his pool. So his pool has maybe got a bit of wobbles and waves and everything, because now he's got a challenge. Then we look at it with the horses, or maybe with art, or a combination. And through that, it's like, okay, we're looking at that. The pressure can come off. Maybe there's a sentence or two that he has to say. It's that acknowledging something as it is, whatever that may be. And when he connects back into himself, his soul is able, it's allowing the soul to express. And it will cause a calmness. And we can look at that as having thrown a pebble into that which would cause ripples that then work in their time to help something to weave out that disharmony. When you have a constellation, like, you don't talk so much about it afterwards, and allowing that time, because the talking actually causes more disruption.
I get that. And
people's opinions. And I guess it's something in like, we talk too much. I mean, we know that. And and yet sometimes I remember a Chinese acupuncturist many years ago. I was going through a series with a back issue, and I'd mentioned about, like, it gets a little bit better and it's not, and I'm wondering, and his advice was to stop looking at it, because you're going to chase the healing away. And I never forgot that. And if I have to thread back to what he said then and into the work now, and it's even something I find in my animal communication work, that I suggest to people to allow like 2 weeks for things to land, and don't expect to make sense of everything immediately. I mean, we know through the training that sometimes answers can come years down the line, as they're ready to. But sometimes just having to hear it is the first step. Even though we haven't heard it with our mind, our soul's heard it. And it's there where the real work seems to happen. And it's not really something that always makes sense. Generally, it doesn't make sense. If you've walked away from a constellation a little bit confused, that's a good thing. And you just leave it and you carry on with your life, and through that, shifts happen. And with the horses, why I enjoy working with the horses, I mean, I can work with people too. You can work with like these little doll representatives that also take on the energy of the situation. But the horses are just so non-judgmental and so in the moment. And I mean, they're doing this work whether we have a workshop or not. It's just how much we really see. And I see it with all the animals, though. The more I see this work, they really, their hearts are so open, and helping us to open ours more.
So the equine assisted healing, is that part of the constellation work, or is that something that you do separately?
So it is. I've trained with the Omega horse constellations. I trained with the Brazilian lady Claudia Vassal, and it's working with the horses. Mainstream understands it more as the equine assisted. There's different modalities in that. There's some where people do riding. There might be, there's different ways that people do it in their approach and whatever way they've trained. Again, going back to, the horses are there as healers, and it's how we enhance that. I approach it through working with the art and the horses, and looking at these horses as teachers, and that they are connected into this field, and they help people come there with things they want to work with, and you see how the horses reflect that. And if I'm ever in doubt, it's always so interesting seeing how the horses that have a similar story to somebody, or maybe you can see somebody's walking a little bit sore on the one leg, and then the horse that's also a little bit sore that side, they'll resonate together. Me knowing the history of these horses and knowing them very well, and also seeing how their behavior changes with the different groups. And often we work in a field, and we often start, and the horses are nowhere to be, well, not nowhere to be seen, but they're far away. And as we do the meditation, and then working with a bit of the art, and then they do a few other things, then you see things starting to change as people are connecting more, or getting into touch with those things, dropping those stories, igniting their own wisdom. And it's incredible what the insights that are shared often. They have me in awe every time. Yeah. So going back to answering your question, is the equine assisted healing, the way I work is based on the constellation principles. So it's that working a little bit more in silence. I mean, it's not like you got to be quiet in school, but it's using the magic of the energy of what's happening, and letting the spirit and the soul really talk and show what's needed. And similar, like when we speak with an animal, what comes out might not always be something that somebody's expecting, yet those are the things that want to come out. And it's the same with this work, is what's needed to come out and looked at might not be what the person came there for originally, but something a lot deeper. And just being really open, and when we step back and allow that, we unfold for something much bigger than what our heads think we need. So yeah.
Beautiful. And I'm curious about the art therapy. How does that, what role does that play in all of these?
So with all of this work, you learn through your own experience, and you learn theory too, but it's also through your own experiences and journey. And the art, Carl Jung also used that a lot, of our creative and bringing out the expressions of the subconscious. And that we've gone through processes of learning how drawings talk, and working with the drawings as a therapist as well, and allowing the person to, I love it, drawing without a paintbrush, so that you're really just having that connection and working on the paper. And what comes out can be very enlightening. I did a year process with that, and if I was planning a collage, I couldn't have done it better in just how the journey unfolded. And then we also work with art, which is not art, sorry, clay, which is what I work with the horses. And for me, the clay, besides the practicalities that it's easier than painting in the middle of a field, is that clay is from the earth, and it's that connection with the hands and to the body, and letting the hands express. I mean, we expressive beings, and yet it's like our hands have been cut off because we don't always have that. And I can so connect. Sometimes you see people really struggling because either it has to be perfect or whatever the inner critic's saying, and just allowing their hands to create something. And I'm always fascinated with how whatever they've created, whether it's a flower or something else, how it ties into their story or the challenges that they're having, and how it reveals sometimes. I mean, I work through a meditation first. We're connecting people into their bodies and inviting the body to be able to be given a voice, and just for that to come through in what they create. And then often that's also an entry into a constellation, is just looking at what that is and what it's showing that needs to be looked at or wants to be looked at. So it's ruined art. No, it hasn't ruined art, but it's kind of like, I always enjoy looking at things in that deeper sense now, and what is that expression, or what is that going on in that person that's created this.
Wow.
Yeah. And it's incredible, the depth of that.
Yeah, it's actually something I've been, I guess, curious about. When you see abstract art, I am one, I like photographs. I like pictures of scenery and pictures of animals.
Claude Monet, there's a famous quote of his that says to look at something absent of its name. In many ways, that summarizes a lot of what we're talking about now, and what we do in our work with the animals also is looking without the judgment or the name of what it is.
Yeah, and that's looking at art where there's no clear subject, and I haven't been interested in trying to understand it, but as I get older, I've been a little bit more curious. And what you've just said now, that really resonates, because it's taking away the mental thought and feeling and seeing what's behind it. And yeah, I love so that. You've mentioned the orders of love a couple of times. Can you tell us what they are?
Yes, sure. So Bert Hellinger, through his work as he was evolving with this constellation work, discovered that there's these three, what he called the orders of love. And when those were in harmony, then the family system is in harmony. And those orders, are the three orders, is hierarchy, fair trade, and inclusion. And I started to see how, through the animal communication, also when there's disharmony in a relationship, whether it's with the animals or in a family dynamic, or even just a personal relationship, that generally there's one of those or all of them that were out of order. I would see it in myself and in my own relationships and dynamics as I was learning this work. And you see it in constellation work a lot. So also when the kitten comes home and the older cat or dog gets moaned at for smacking the kitten, that order is not honored. I found when I started looking at that hierarchy in my multiple animal family, I would almost visualize the order of how each of them came, and found that somehow that did bring a change in the ripples. And the fair trade, I mean, it's nothing like being paid too little for a job. It's that give and take, and however that balance looks. And it's the same with the animals. If you look at the horse that is used in a riding school, and all he does is ride and have to take little kids, but he never gets a break or something that takes, and then they wonder why he becomes grumpy. Or the competition horse that's always having to do. And that has to be expressed somehow. So it'll be expressed in the best way that they can, and through behavior. And then when one starts to see that and giving back and investing in the relationship, things change. And when we see it like walking dogs, you know, that we want them to be a guard dog, but then we don't spend the time with them walking them. With the inclusion, exclusion, I mean, that's a big one now, especially in our society right now with things that are going on, and you're excluded for these choices. And in reading one of Bert Hellinger's books, I Rising in Love, he talks about how the one thing that's sort of fatal for the soul is to be excluded. And most of our actions in life is to be included in sort of saying the right things or doing the right things, if you reflect back in one's life, because we don't want to be judged. And what is it, not wanting to be judged? It's not wanting to be excluded. So when the cat that always slept in the baby's room, but now the baby's come home, they wonder why the cat doesn't like the baby, or the dog gets grumpy because the child is taking precedence over the animal. And of course the child has needs and needs more, but it can be done in a way that includes that dog who also has an interest in this child. I've worked with the couple as well, and it's always interesting to see what the animal reflects in that. And how they reflect things, and usually when there's disharmony and problems, it can be when some of those orders aren't working.
Wow. I hope you've enjoyed this conversation. Part 2 will be uploaded shortly. In the description of this video, I have included Anthea's website and email address, along with the website addresses of Animal Talk Africa and the Global White Line Protection Trust. If you'd like to support these conversations, I've also included a couple of places you can donate to. 50% of any donations will be shared with the White Lions. Thank you for your support.